Hey guys, and welcome to episode 131 of the Actual Fluency podcast. Today I'm joined by my friend Conor Clyne, who's formerly known as the Language Tsar. Now he's a bit more like the Tsar Experience, so it's more about traveling and meeting new people. And the reason that I wanted to bring Conor on for this episode at this particular time in the season is that we've had quite a lot of episodes that are very language learning specific, very nitty gritty. We talked about methods with Mike from Glossica, Mike Campbell. We're very into a linguist's mood there, talking about academic research on language learning. And then I had my friend Dave on, and we talked a lot about what kind of language learning philosophies or mentalities that one has, and maybe some of the struggles also related to comparing oneself to other learners, how to actually avoid frustration, and maybe figuring out what you really want to do with languages. So I thought a little breakup would be nice with Conor today, because Conor, he has shifted some of his perspective. He was, like I said, formerly known as a language Tsar, and he came on the show a few years back to talk about how he managed to learn a lot of languages. I think he knows more than 10 to a pretty good level now. And he shifted more into a sort of a travel, dating, relationships, that kind of thing today, called the Tsar Experience. So it's more of a full package, I guess, where, of course, language learning is a huge part of it, and he still really contends that he gets these really amazing experiences, particularly in Eastern Europe, because of his language learning abilities that he'd put so much work into before. But that's also the goal here on the podcast. I want to show not only how to learn languages, but also, or I mean, how people have learned languages, but I also want to show what you can actually do with them. So this episode today is about Conor's experiences in Eastern Europe, particularly because that's the place in the world he's very fond of and he's spent a lot of time in. So that's why it's kind of central. Obviously, Conor's experience is unique to him, and your experience might vary, as we'll look into in the episode, and obviously he can't speak for all genders, races, or people from all around the world. But I still think it's interesting to listen to Connor's stories, because sometimes they can be a little bit crazy compared to the rest of the world. So I hope you enjoy this kind of intermediate episode with Conor about what you can use your languages for, and some tips about traveling in Eastern Europe, in case you want to explore those areas before they get too touristy by globalization. And next week we'll be back with a more language-oriented episode again. So enjoy this one with Conor Clyne, and let me know what you think in the comments. There are some kind of I wouldn't call them edgy topics in this show. It's more like different than what most of the episodes are about, and I hope you enjoy it. And if you don't, well, next week there'll be a more standard episode where we're back to talking about learning languages again. This episode is brought to you in partnership with Glossica Language Courses. They offer courses in more than 50 languages, and you can learn without using your mouse or your keyboard or anything. You just press play, and the software will do your daily reps for you, your daily repetitions, using an algorithm that tests how well you know the content, and it keeps getting increasingly difficult. There is a big difference in what courses you get. So some courses have thousands and thousands of sentences, whereas newer courses like Manx and Welsh have slightly less, but they also have the benefit of being free forever. If you want to get access to all 50 courses, or 50 plus, I should say, they're always adding new ones, go to tryglossica.com and give it a try without any credit card details or any money over the counter. And if you like it, you can sign up and tell them that Chris sent you, and I'm sure you'll be very well taken care of. And now for the episode with Conor. Conor, welcome back to the Actual Fluency podcast. It's been, I think, 4 years since you were last on in episodes 34 and 35. For the
How
people,
time flies, Chris. Thanks very much for having me back on your podcast. I can't believe it's been that many years, dude. We've seen each other so often in different countries. And what episode are we up to now?
It's 127-ish, 28 maybe. So Yeah, it's been a long time. But can you let the listeners know what's happened since then, and maybe just start with a brief introduction, who you are, where you're from, just in case people didn't listen to episode 34, 35 in the last few months.
Exactly. If you haven't listened recently to the last 100 episodes of Actual Fluency, I am Conor Clyne, and I am the creator of the Tsar Experience. Right. So I have a YouTube channel, which is my name, Conor Clyne Tsar Experience, and I have a website, www.tsarexperience.com. And you may know me because I'm the artist formerly known as the Language Tsar.
Yeah.
So this was the pseudonym that I used at the beginning, and when I was on that previous podcast episode here, that was my name at the time. That's what I was using on the internet, and that's basically because I'm a polyglot. First of all, I guess that's how I got into YouTube and doing stuff online, creating content. And I speak many languages. Normally, when asked how many, I say more than 10. And I was inspired by the very first polyglot conference that Richard Simcat organized in 2013 in Budapest, Hungary. And in fact, a little digression, and Chris, we actually went to that location.
But you couldn't remember where it was, though. You knew the street, but you couldn't remember the building.
But I found it. Or did I just find the street in the end? But anyways, I showed you. We took a photo from under a sign that was at least very close to that famous photo from above onto that street in Budapest, where the first 100 polyglots gathered together for a polyglot conference ever. So that's kind of how I got into it. I was very inspired by that. And when we last spoke on the podcast, I was, focusing on just general language learning and tips and sharing my experiences through my YouTube channel, which was very low tech at the time. I had, I think, an iPhone 5. I was filming on that, sometimes with a lavalier mic, and basically writing articles for my blog, which were kind of general language learning topics, a little bit of travel, but very small. It was like maybe 1% of what I was doing. And fast forward 4 years, and things have been revolutionized where on my end, I now aim for very high production quality. I'm basically a travel vlogger who gives advice not just on traveling, but has a geographical focus in terms of Eastern Europe, the real east of Europe, the real raw east of Europe. And I show my viewers how you can have an amazing travel experience in these countries that's not touristic, and you can build up amazing relationships by using local languages and by dating beautiful women. I guess that's probably it in a nutshell, even though that's quite a long-winded thing. When people ask me, I can't really say it in 5 pithy words. I mean, I guess I can say it's travel, language, dating, Eastern Europe. There are 5 words. Yeah,
sure.
So that's me.
But let's go back to that a little bit. So you're originally in the legal profession, a lawyer.
Oh yes, I always forget to mention that because there was a time in my life
so far away.
I was very serious, Chris, and I was a lawyer, and I was a very.
So why did you? I mean, we probably talked about this last time, but why did you decide to go into law if you're so interested in languages, culture, and traveling?
Well, they're not there's no conflict there in terms of being a lawyer. You can be obviously interested in those other things, but basically, I had studied law as an undergraduate because my career guidance teacher at high school had advised me to become a lawyer. My uncle was a lawyer, and I went for 1 week to his law firm, and it seemed super cool because he he rolled out the red carpet and made it seem super sexy. But then when I started working as one, it wasn't quite what I had expected, and it wasn't really what I want to do in terms of being passionate about, when I wake up every morning. So definitely this project with YouTube, creating content and, helping people and seeing the impact that I can have definitely makes it's a world of difference compared to when I was, writing legal briefs in my office at 3 a.m. in the morning, not really caring about the client's outcome because I didn't really like the client a lot of the time, which is normal when you don't get to choose them.
Right.
So yeah, I'm actually Irish-British. I should give a little bit of my background in that sense. And I've lived and traveled all over the world. Was educated in in five different countries at university at third level, and then worked in several others, primarily in North America and in Europe. Although I have traveled, of course, to the other continents, and that's actually part of my language learning journey. That's why I speak so many languages, because I studied in so many different countries and traveled to them. Even though I sucked at language in high school, it's probably something that you hear on the podcast really frequently, Chris, is the people who were not good at high school suddenly become the, super duper polyglots later on in life. That's a pretty common path.
That,
Benny Lewis as
that was
well.
the narrative last time you were on, actually. It was how you went from basically zero to hero in not too many years, at least from adolescence into in your 20s, getting all those languages. What kind of reasons and stories that made that happen? So if people are interested in more of that origin stories of how you actually became this super polyglot, that I'll really recommend people going back. We had a long episode that was split into two parts back then, about episode 34. So that's really cool. But when did you... I see also, by the way, just mentioning the YouTube channel, you were doing videos back then. They weren't as good as they are now, just to put it nicely. They were very useful.
Chris, you've used other words in our private chats that are less flattering or less polite than that they were not quite as good.
Yeah, but I kept hammering you with feedback, and you took some of it on board, and now the videos are great, and you've even had some viral hits. You're up to 4.6 million views, which is quite a lot, even for YouTube. There are some big hitters there, of course, but when did you know, because I guess that's kind of recently, that you moved your focus away from languages? I mean, changing your name from the Language Tsar, now you're the Tsar Experience, so it's quite different there, and you don't make as many language-specific videos anymore. I see some of them still about, the areas that you visit, the local languages, but talk us through that kind of change. How did you know that you wanted to do more about the traveling side of things?
Well, I guess indirectly I should be thanking you, Chris, because when we hung out in Hungary together, it's almost 2 years ago, I bought my first real camera because you looked at it and didn't buy it in the shop. And I was like, well, I don't know anything about cameras. Chris seems to think it's good. And I had not even seen Casey Neistat at the time. And you say, yeah, Casey Neistat uses this one. It was like Ken 70D. So then I bought it. It was the model that's there. What you call it? The model that everyone plays around with.
The demo model.
It. The what?
The demo model.
The demo, yeah, of course. The demo that's there. Well, it's not really a demo. It's like the one that they take out the box, whatever it's called. So I bought that one because it's a little bit cheaper. And then I started making videos on that. And of course, I had no idea what I was doing. They were better than the ones I had done on the iPhone 5 because they were just abysmal. But I was only a tiny bit better in the beginning. So basically, I suddenly started realizing now I can film properly, or at least try to film properly, like my travels, right? And then I started to think, do I really want to make these videos always about languages? I don't really think that's where I can provide the best value to viewers on YouTube. Mm-hmm. I think that what I'm doing in terms of traveling, where I'm going, is a lot more interesting. So it's really been trial and error. And then I started to invest a lot more in the equipment in the last year. I also have someone who helps me a lot with the video editing. He's really good. And I started to think, okay, this is becoming more serious. How do I make this work, right? What is interesting? So I experimented a good bit. I also did videos in Western Europe, and no one cared. Like, you should, the video goes out and it's just like crickets, silence. Like, after a year, I'm kind of looking back at them now. It's almost a year since I published like about 5 videos. But I think the quality is pretty good, at least the editing. My filming was progressing slowly because my editor would complain all the time about why did I did things this way and this way because it sucks. So I was kind of improving, and I was improving on camera. I invested like hundreds of hours into learning how to, improve on camera, how to film, the equipment, everything. It's just been a huge learning process. And when you see like a travel vlog like I made from Bucharest, which has 100,000 views very quickly, and I didn't even have a good time when I was there. And then when I had an amazing time somewhere else, like Iceland, when we went to the Polyglot Gathering, and then like it has 1,500 views after like a year, you're like, okay, obviously no one cares about this story of the Irish-British guy hanging out in Iceland. But they do care apparently when I'm in Moldova and Romania and Ukraine, and that's actually been reinforced when I went back to see my accountant in Ireland because I went to the local pub. And a lot of the local guys, because we went to school together, they came over and they were like, "Wow, we follow you on Instagram and YouTube, but it's been so boring the last 2 weeks. You've been in Ireland. Like, we don't watch you to see you in Ireland. We watch you to see that you're in these kind of crazy places like Belarus and Ukraine and Romania, and Moldova, and you're in these obscure towns, and even the capital, and you're having lunch and." You're hanging out with some pretty girls or whatever, right? And then it's like that kind of was what I suspected. Conor backpacking to Germany on a budget would probably be the least viewed video of all time, right? Conor being in, like I'm in Ismail, actually, I should tell you, I'm in Ismail, which is on the border with Romania. It's in Ukraine. It's supposed to be a regional tourist destination. I have not even seen one menu in anything other than Russian. And I have definitely not seen anyone who did not seem to be Russian speaking since I arrived 2 days ago. This is the kind of stuff that my audience wants. And this is where I can provide value, like information, entertainment, satisfy their curiosity. So that's kind of why I started making the change. You were also party to a watershed in this when we went to the mastermind in Tenerife. I think it was back in April. We had a fantastic 5 days together in a beautiful villa in the south of Tenerife, and I hung out there a few days and kind of digested everything that I was told. And I went there with a real open mind because I didn't feel like up until then the project was really making the kind of headway I wanted it to, and you, along with other participants, really helped me focus and say, listen, you have an experience. That you're basically selling to people, that you're showing people, right? And you need to focus in on these different elements of it and, keep it in Eastern Europe and just stop doing everything else, basically. So that's why it's no longer a language-specifically blog. I'm trying to show people, listen, if you go and learn the language, this is one element in having an incredible fantasy-like lifestyle in this region in the world.
That's what I definitely want to ask you more about this episode, because I know the people listening are usually not just interested in learning languages. Of course, that's a big topic here on the podcast. But most people are also interested in how can I travel to different unique places? How can I do it cheaper, more efficiently? How can I avoid getting robbed? What can I do to make those travels easier? So we'll definitely talk about that in a moment. But first, I just want to this is a bit of a leading question, but what's so good in your eyes about Eastern Europe? What's so interesting that you want to spend? Because obviously you have to actually go there to make these videos, even if they are interesting and even if people do watch them. You yourself need to have the interest first, I imagine, to make them valuable and good. So what is it in that region that interests you personally so much? What's the difference between those parts of the world and maybe contrast it to Western Europe, Ireland, where you're from?
Yeah, I think the contrast, maybe not even with countries as far west as Ireland or France or Germany I mentioned. Like when I mean Eastern Europe, I'm not talking about Central Europe. I'm not talking about Hungary. You can forget like these weekend trips in Prague. This is not Eastern Europe. This is Central Europe. Look at a map. I don't want to have a debate about it geographically, and most certainly politically and culturally. That is Central Europe, 100%. Yeah. And what I'm talking about is the countries further to the east of that have a different history and culture. And that's primarily here in Ukraine, Russia, of course, Moldova. So the countries that form the Soviet Union. It's a little bit debatable about the Baltics because they are quite distinct. They're more Northern European, but they do have a connection that does make what I'm doing relevant to that. So one big difference you're going to notice is I think, did I already say this already on the podcast? I don't know. I talk to so many people all day, but I'm in Ismail and I've not even seen a menu in English, right? Yeah. There are no international tourists here. We're right on the border of Romania. I'm sure some Romanians wander across at times. There's no actual border crossing here. You have to go up through Moldova. And there is an historic Bulgarian community here, along with lots of different ethnicities. I'm going to make a travel vlog, so you can watch that on my YouTube channel, probably in about 2 weeks' time. After these few days, but that's part of the reason. I'm somewhere where people like me just don't come to.
Right.
I'm not going to bump. I'm probably going out clubbing. I was actually out last night with a girlfriend, and I didn't. There was actually a Turkish DJ playing in the club because they opened this new club, and I think the DJ and maybe his buddy who was with him were the only two like non-Ukrainians who are there, right? And I'm not expecting to see like any other foreigners when I go out tonight, right? I have a unique experience, and people who then meet me, like they're also going to get a unique experience because obviously I'm very different, right? The experience of meeting me here is obviously different. People react to you differently when you go somewhere where it's not so touristic, especially if it's not, touristic from where people like you are from. So whether you happen to be Asian and you go to Western Europe, maybe it's different. If you go to somewhere like the west coast of Ireland because there are a few Asians, right? That would be an interesting thing to do. But if you go to Paris, like all of them, then it's not going to be the same thing. So the first thing is like you get a very different experience. And being a novelty is a huge advantage anywhere. So I would say like, it's just like the way you're treated is just so much better by people when you're not in a touristic place or not, like the masses. So you get this very interesting perspective on a country and a culture that you don't get if you go like backpacking around Europe to like even to Croatia, right? It's just the same thing. You're just on a tourist trail. You're going to meet other tourists. So I'm not going to meet any tourists when I'm here. That's amazing. I'm going to meet local people, and maybe there's some other traveler from Ukraine or somewhere else, but it's probably 99% going to be a local person. That's something that's really distinct on my travel vlog, actually, because nearly everyone else is showing people who they meet in their youth hostel, but they have a tour guide bringing them around and maybe appear in an episode, or maybe the owner of a restaurant because they've been paid to publicize it. But they don't show you the interaction with local people because they don't have it.
Right.
Like most of them don't want to even meet local people. They're there to take Instagram photos and hang out with other travelers because they feel a common bond with them. But I came to this region because I was curious about meeting the people from here. So I think it's a huge part of it. It's just that unique experience with local people. I mean, I love languages, and even though I sucked up at school, so I guess I didn't love them so much at school, but I definitely loved learning them as an adult and using them. And I went into that probably in the podcast here, the earlier one. Not that I can remember too much about what I said at this stage 4 years later. So for me, like Russian is a challenge. This is like really been a lot harder than the other languages I've learned. And I don't actually really actively learn it in the sense of I don't have classes anymore, but I just basically speak all the time. There's a word or something that I'm constantly messing up, then I'll go and Google the answer. So that's really exciting for me to get to do everything in Russian here. I know this is Ukraine, so the official language before anyone trolls is Ukrainian, but the sound I'm in right now is Mayil, the lingua franca, the language that everybody's using to each other is Russian. Right. If it were Ukrainian, I would be, of course, practicing my Ukrainian, but that's not the case in this particular town or in Odessa, where I spent a lot of this summer. So that's another thing, is I get to use my languages. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's tied in. I was just going to say that's really tied into basically the language side, is that you wouldn't be able to have those experiences in those regions if you didn't put the effort in to learn the language at some point. Because I imagine that if somebody went to where you are now and didn't have any knowledge of Russian or Ukrainian, they would probably not have the greatest time ever.
They would probably I guarantee they would not have the Tsar Experience.
Right.
So yes, that's true. Of course, they wouldn't be able to communicate. The English levels, language skills in this region are some of the poorest in the world. I think it's like there's some, I can't remember which company graded it, unfortunately, off the top of my head, but they had like 5 categories, and this region is category number 4. Number 1 category being the best, number 5 being the worst on a global level. So they had them near the bottom. So don't come here and expect. Obviously, younger people do speak more English, but don't come here and expect you're going to walk around like, I don't know, and be able to speak in English everywhere. That's obviously not going to happen if you can't even get a menu. Right. I'm not actually sure what people do in those situations. I guess they say pizza, and then they quack. I don't know. They make noises like like a chicken or something.
Yeah, throw the napkin or something. I don't actually know that either. Yeah. But that's a good.
So language is essential. I think that's the point we want to make in terms of having that kind of local experience, and that's why when I watch these other travel vloggers, they're not interacting with locals because they don't care about the language. It's kind of like, I guess, works both ways. They don't care really about meeting locals, so they're obviously not going to learn language either. But definitely, I always encourage people to learn language. It may be hard, and it may take a while to get the big benefit from your investment. You will get it in the end. Another reason to come to this part of Europe is the price level. Like people always tell me, "Oh, I've been to Prague or Bratislava, and everything was so cheap," and I'm like, "You found 3 times the price of Ukraine cheap? Where are you normally hanging out? Oh, you're from New York. Oh, you're from London. Oh, you're from Paris. So you thought, oh, it's half price of London. Yeah, well, here's news for you. Here is 20% of the price. And it ain't going to last for very much longer because it's actually going up 20% in the last while, but that still means instead of 15% of the price, it's like 25%.
Mm.
Um, I did a video recently with Danny Danny, who has a YouTube channel called Got a World to See. And he was estimating what he does in Germany. Yeah, he was thinking it's probably about a third the price if you do the really high-end stuff. But we're talking about the same high quality in Odessa, which is a very touristic city, versus like a normal German city. He thinks it's like a third of the price.
Right.
Like, I don't know. I try to give you an example. I'm staying in an Airbnb, which actually has a it's actually a two-bedroom apartment. That's all I could find. And I'm paying with the Airbnb fee 17 euros a night. I am located about 50 meters, no, I'd say 100 meters both north and I'm to the west of the two main thoroughfares, two main streets in the city. So I'm like smack bang in the middle. And it's quite comfortable. That's 17 euros a night. I had a pizza at a very nice restaurant. And I think I paid for the pizza, but I had a lot of other stuff, so I'm not going to be able to quote it. But it was probably, yeah, was it 3 or 4 euros? Like something like that. But this was a place that was very nice. It was obviously one of the nicest places in the city.
So you get
I had a
good value.
shisha, and I think I paid. I think it was like 140 hryvnia. So that's like about 4 euros 30. Is that really that cheap? God. Yeah, it was a little bit under
yourself.
I like to tip the guys who do the shisha because it's kind of a hazardous job. So they're probably all going to die at like 40. So I kind of like to tip them a little bit more than the normal 10%. I normally tip them 20. So I think I left a little bit over 5 euros. Yeah.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. I just want to take a quick break to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, Glossica, who provide audio courses for language learners in over 50 different languages. They are heavily based on spaced repetition, so you get a lot of repetitions, which means that you start to understand the language in a context, and you kind of understand intuitively the grammar elements and the different conjugations that the language has. The sentences of Glossica are very grammatically based, which means that you get a lot of different aspects of the language automatically. What I really like about the Glossica courses is the hands-off feature. So whereas apps like Duolingo or Memrise, all these apps on my phone, I have to constantly click the mouse, I have to constantly choose the next course. Glossica is completely automated with their algorithm, which means that when I click do my reps, I do my daily reps, and it just kind of plays them for me. So I can just sit and focus entirely on listening, and obviously try and repeat it in my head as well, what they're saying, trying to do the translation. So for me, that's really great, and it also really enforces some daily learning habits instead of just saying, oh, should I go one more level in Duolingo or whatever. So if you want to give Glossica a try, go to tryglossica.com. Glossica is spelled Glossika. So that's tryglossica.com for your free trial. I think they give you 1,000 repetitions for free, which is quite a lot. And if you really like it, you can continue with a monthly paid subscription, which covers all the languages, which is great for aspiring polyglots or people who want to learn a lot of languages. And you can also triangulate them, so the content will be the same, and so you can use some of your knowledge to pick up newer languages even faster. So enjoy it, and also speaking of enjoy it, let's enjoy the rest of the episode with today's featured guest. Right. Well, that's pretty cool. So what other tips do you have for people who, let's say they've studied a bit of Russian or maybe a lot of Russian, and they want to go to that region that you're talking about, but they don't really know anything about it because they've never been there. Is there anything they need to know before they get there, or can just?
Well, the best thing is just watch my channel. You give lots of advice. You know what? I'm going to say this. I'm going to call out a very close friend of mine, but he got caught out. He flew to Belarus for a connecting flight to Russia. How did he do this? No, he flew. Oh yes, he wanted a flight out of Belarus via Russia to another third destination country. I can't remember which one it was. And he didn't know that it counts as a domestic flight from Belarus to Russia, which means you need a Russian visa if you're going to transit. I had already said that in one of my videos. And he told me, I asked him, do you have your visa for Russia? He's like, yeah, I might get it on my other passport, because he's the guy who has two different nationalities. I might be able to use my other passport. I said, fine. he obviously watches my videos since he travels with me, right? And he's seen the video where I talk about another friend who had this problem. And then the next day he's like, yeah, I had to, I'm still at the airport. They wouldn't let me on the flight to Moscow. I was like, why are you going to Moscow without a visa? Like, I made a video about this. It's in one of my videos. And he's like, oh, which one? So they just saying you to watch my videos, even though you're in them. Unless she's in them, apparently he doesn't watch them. So that's the value of them, right? He lost like 200 euros.
So what do you need to know
because of
about
that.
visas to go to, let's say, Ukraine or surrounding countries? Can European citizens go in just get a tourist visa, or do you need to do it in advance?
So basically, a country like Ukraine, let's start with Ukraine. I actually have I have a complete video about the visa-free regimes in the region. Just go look at my YouTube channel and type in visa-free. Belarus just changed theirs, so the video is not up to date in Belarus. It's actually gotten easier. Now it's 30 days visa-free. So basically, I'm going to speak to people who are like North American and have a EU nationality, because I can't account for everybody's particular situation. Of course, sometimes it's easier being Turkish, sometimes it's easier being Colombian, and sometimes it's harder, right? So I just don't know. I'm not going to look up every permutation. But for those people, it's 90 days visa-free. So don't get confused between having a visa and being visa-free, right? It's visa-free. That means you don't have to do anything else other than your passport to arrive in Ukraine. You can stay 90 days every 180. So think 3 months every 6 months. In Belarus, it's 30 days, visa-free. You can actually come back. The difference with Belarus, you can actually come back the same day. You just have to fly out of the country. Okay. And that's actually only if you fly in and out of Minsk airport currently. But you can stay 90 days per year visa-free. That means you don't need anything else other than your passport. Okay, they make you buy insurance as well in Belarus, I should say that. But you buy it in the airport for a few euros as you enter. Mm-hmm. Russia is really hard. Russia, there are a few visa-free regimes, or normally means having to come in a ferry cruise, and it's like a lot of documentation. So basically, you probably will need a visa. Moldova is also visa-free, 90 days, whenever every 180, same regime as Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty easy, basically, for Moldova and Serbia as well, if we want to include Serbia in this. The other countries are like in the EU, so that's completely different regime, right? So that's normally the same. It's like visa-free forever. You can travel everywhere if you're an EU citizen, and if you're North American, then you've got I think it's the same 90 days, 180, if I remember. I'm not really 100% sure of that, but so double check it if you are planning that trip. So that's basically it. It's easy to come to Ukraine, which is actually why I'm always in Ukraine in part and not in Russia, because Russia makes it hard.
Yeah.
And Ukraine is a little bit cheaper, not much cheaper to be honest, but it's easy. So that's basically a huge factor to come here.
Where do you recommend people go exactly? Is it a good idea to go to Odessa if you're just going to there for the first time because it's more sort of tourist friendly, or are there other places that you would say offer a better experience, maybe a better Tsar experience even?
Yeah, exactly. I think we're leaving out one of the main components of the Tsar experience. We've run into the travel and the language, but we've left out the dating, Chris.
Of course, yeah.
We're not being fair to your listeners. So, and I guess that's where they're like, basically, shut up and talk about dating, Conor. Yeah, so as you probably noticed, it's not exactly a secret, women from Eastern Europe, in general, are perceived as being really beautiful. And I would concur with my own personal experience, my own personal taste in saying that women here overall are better looking in general than, say, in other regions of the world. I would say hands down, it's like this, Belarus, Ukraine, even parts of the Baltics, also amazing, and other parts of Eastern Europe like Moldova, Serbia. So guys normally come here, and that's normally who watches my channel. It's overwhelmingly guys. They normally come in the hope, aspiration, maybe dream of meeting a beautiful girl, several, one to marry forever, etc. Right? So what I would say, if it's going to be your first trip to come, then you should probably go to somewhere like Kiev, mm-hmm. Because it's a capital city, and it depends on what your level of Russian is. I mean, of course, they will be able to communicate in the restaurants in English, and has good tourist infrastructure. Odessa is actually a bit harder to come to because it's just like a lot of people get scammed in Odessa more than other cities. So if you're a naive first timer, like I talk about this in my vodcast series on the channel. I don't think I have that. No, I talked a little bit about it in the episode last week, and I'm going to be talking about an episode. I think it's like 8 or 9. So in about a month. Some of the things happened to me on my first trip because I was in Kiev, I was in Lviv, Kiev, I was in Crimea, and then in Odessa, and in Moldova on that first trip, and then into the Balkans. And I really had a lot of problems the first time. I was robbed. So a girl tried to rob my phone. There's kind of a funny story about how I got it back. I was drugged for 36 hours in Crimea.
Yep.
The phone was attempted theft was in Odessa. So I think Kiev is a little bit safer for first-time tourists, or Lviv in the west of Ukraine, where there's also a lot of tourist infrastructure and people speak more English. So you're not going to be as disorientated when you get there, because traveling leaves you disorientated. It's new experience. Like, that's one thing that for me, like we described where I had to cross the border just before we come on this podcast episode. And, for me, I'm completely unfazed, but I think for 99% of people, they would have been terrified, taking a taxi late at night with some dodgy as hell taxi driver across the border,
right?
Between Moldova and Ukraine. And I'm just like, I told you, like, really, at the end of the trip, the driver was scared of me. I was intimidating him because I'm just like, I'm all over everything, talking to the border guards, giving him the instructions what to do. I mean, he probably maybe even thought about robbing me, to be honest, considering the circumstances in the beginning, but he was fucking scared by the end of it. So,
So what do you need to look out for if you're coming to Ukraine or a similar place in the region for the first time? Like, what kind of scams are the worst ones? What do you need to look out for? I think that's a good little PSA to put out there.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about, we'll keep it gender neutral for the beginning, right? So you're a guy or a girl, you're showing up. I think people might try to shortchange you a little bit. That's just one small thing, inconvenience. It doesn't happen to me because I speak Russian, but I have heard of that happening. There's a little bit of a problem with petty crime in Odessa late at night around the center, targeting tourists this summer. Before, I would say it was really, really safe. I still think overall the country is so much safer than in Western Europe in a big city, but there is that little bit of thing to watch out for. I don't think actually girls need to be more careful than guys. I actually think it's maybe safer being a girl in Eastern Europe, to be honest, because guys probably assume you have no money and you're not worth robbing. And so there isn't that kind of harassment of women that might happen in a lot of Western Europe. So I don't think there's that kind of specific. I think men need to be a lot more careful, for sure, because there are a lot of honey traps, a lot of girls who are paid, professional scammers. They have agreements with restaurants. They will meet them over maybe a dating app or approach them on the street and then bring them to a restaurant, and then they will get absolutely fleeced by the bill, right? And some big bouncer will come over and say, you got to pay that. Like I tell about this in one of my videos. I think I have a video about scams. I don't remember what it's called. I think 5 biggest scams maybe when traveling in Europe or Eastern Europe or something like that. And I talk about the story about a Portuguese guy who befriended me leaving a club once, and then the next day he actually had a table at the same club again, and he's like, Conor, can you tell me if this bill is okay, this check? And I looked at him and said, well, did you have 18 bottles of champagne? He's like, no, we had one and a seafood platter. Well, I see the seafood platter. They were honest about that. There's only one of those in the menu. But there are 18 bottles of champagne in there. That's why it cost you 400 euros and not 30. And it was local champagne, right? So, yeah. So those kind of things you got to be careful of. And he had met this girl on a dating app. Of course, she just unmatches him afterwards and then creates a new profile. It's very easy to be untraceable like that. He didn't have their personal details. Of course, I was drugged. I'm not really sure how it happened. I don't think that's a very helpful story, other than be careful. So I think guys definitely need to be careful of girls. Even girls who are not necessarily scamming, just girls wasting their time because they get a free meal. Because guys here take the lead, and on a date always pay the bill. So in that sense, you just need to be careful about who you go out with, because maybe they're just interested in free food, and maybe they're going to a restaurant, bring their girlfriends and order lots of champagne and sushi or whatever, not because they have agreement with the restaurant, just because they want free food, right? And you're the kind of
well, that can happen anywhere, though, to be fair.
I think it doesn't happen on the same level as here, judging by my foreign friends and their complaints.
But Conor, let's break this down, right?
Yeah.
I understand, and I'm speaking just from personal point of view. I understand the attraction of the price levels. The places are probably nice and interesting to visit. I'm sure you could have great experiences. But how do you then know, let's say, speaking about the dating part, how do you know that the person you're meeting in, let's say, Kiev or Lviv or Odessa or whatever, is not there to just scam you? Like, if you're a guy, surely that's almost impossible to figure out. And
Well, if you're naive, I mean, I don't use dating sites almost ever anymore because I just meet people in daily life, right? And I make a judgment call
so, what are the
about that
warning
particular person.
signs? What are the warning signs you look for?
Oh yeah, I mean definitely. If like you need to here, guys are very assertive, right? So guys plan everything in the date. I think they treat girls like princesses. So basically, if the girl's suggesting to go to a particular restaurant and it's expensive,
Mm,
that's probably a sign that she's interested in eating in the restaurant, not in actually meeting you. So I would always the first thing you should know is like what are the restaurants that I would like to go to, and only insist on going there. Maybe even change where the girl wants. If she says let's go this one, just say another one because maybe she if as long as it's one that you feel comfortable with. If you go to the restaurant and suddenly she's ordering the most expensive things on the menu before you even look yourself, then definitely this is a girl who's not interested in you, because normally the respectful thing to do here, polite thing, is let the guy lead because he's the one actually paying, right? A lot of guys don't understand that. It's not like that you just get stuck with the bill at the end of the day. You actually organize the date. If you don't have any money, don't go to a restaurant with a girl. Go buy a coffee or an ice cream and walk in the park. Right? Like you make the decisions.
sure.
So if the girl starts ordering lots of stuff and whatever and doesn't let you, you decide where we're having champagne or cocktails, we're having sushi or whatever, right? I mean, if she starts ordering all this stuff, then it's clear she's not interested in you. She's not modicum of respect or normal etiquette about this.
But okay, well that's
So
a
I
really
think
good, I
that's a
think
great stop
that's
sign.
a good tip. I think.
Yep.
What about taking it one step further? Because I saw a video you did about the fact that it was about, I think it was something about just Ukrainian girls in general. This is basically how they are. You were trying to give some generalizations, some pointers about the general attitude and mentality there. And a lot of people in the comments were like, you can't generalize a whole country. And some people were saying like, well, this is all girls from everywhere you're describing. But it might not necessarily be a scam. But what about the girls that are looking for like Western tourists to basically elope with, just without really considering the personalities, but maybe they just want an exit or something. Is that a thing? Like, are there girls there who just want to marry away, but not really care who with? Is that a thing in Ukraine these days?
Well, I think to a certain extent it is. There's definitely girls who want to leave, and the girls who would probably marry a foreigner are the less desirable ones.
Uh-huh.
That's probably counterintuitive to a lot of your listeners. But girls who are of high social status here and beauty, they have enough rich local guys throwing money at them. And if they want to go to the Côte d'Azur, they will find some guy to pay for them to do that, right? Most girls don't actually really want to leave, right?
Uh-huh.
And because they just want to go on holidays to these places. They're perfectly fine living in a nice part of Kiev or Odessa and being treated like a princess, right? So I do think you have certain girls that just want to leave for a passport. They're not normally the girls of the highest social value. How to recognize them? Well, yeah, they're like, I'll give you an example. I had a client recently, and he told me that he looked into marrying a girl and what that would entail in terms of her moving to the US. And then he realized he would be responsible for a lot of things if they broke up in terms of Social Security. So he said, yeah, I'm not going to get you a visa for the US and organize this. And she immediately threw a fit. So that was obviously her priority. Like he said, I can move to Ukraine. We'll see how it works out. She was not interested. So
Right.
that's pretty clear. Like she wants to move to the US and have some guy pay for it. Because she's not successful enough to, be qualified enough to get to move there or whatever reason, or she's not of high social status in Ukraine to have a rich guy who's Ukrainian or Russian or something who has a house there or lives there himself and brings her with him. So that's why she goes and she looks for a foreigner. Those kind of girls, I don't know, they don't really approach me because I spend most of my time in the region. So if they were looking to escape, the Tsar Experience is obviously not the way they're going to do it. The Tsar Experience means staying locally and having a fun time with me. But if they want an exit, that's they're going to. It's going to be obvious the way people prioritize things, right? And
Sure.
if they're always talking about moving to the U.S. and what a dream it is, then you got to ask, well, am I the dream, or is the fact that I have a house in California the dream?
Yeah.
And maybe you're fine with that. Maybe you think, I don't care, I get the girl, she comes. Maybe she doesn't stay forever, but that's kind of what I want. So just for yourself, at least don't be naive about these
Right.
things. That'll be my advice. Just, do your checks.
But what about?
Due diligence.
This podcast I know is obviously very split in terms of male and female audience. I don't think there's a large proponent of male listeners necessarily. Obviously, multilingualism in general, we've seen there's a slight tendency to be male, but I would say it's very diminished lately. I thought at the Polyglot Gathering, I think they did a little count, and it was something like 55% male. So obviously, it's a very even split of listeners here. So obviously your perspective is male from yourself, but do you have any advice or tips from, let's say, single Western women coming into the region as tourists? Are there anything they need to be particularly careful about? Is there anything you can tell them to help them, like you've talked about from a guy's perspective?
Yeah, I already alluded to the fact that I think it's safer for female travelers in Eastern Europe and Western Europe. But I'm not a woman, right?
Of
So
course, yeah, of course, yeah.
I'm not the person. I'm not the vlogger that you should be following. You should be following like there's a girl called the Blonde Gypsy, and that's her Instagram, and she blogs from the Balkans. Like she's going to be, so much more valuable to you if you're maybe a woman in her 20s traveling this kind of thing, because I mean that's what she is, right?
Of course.
Um, what I think in general, guys are not known for their looks, and the country overall is poorer, so maybe that puts off a lot of women traveling. There's actually very few female travelers from the West who come. The ones who do, I do see in Ukraine are normally either working for an international organization in Kiev. I've seen a little bit of that now with, of course, Ukraine moving more politically towards the West and away from Russia in the last 5 years. Or they actually have family ties here, so maybe they grew up in the US, but their family is from Odessa, which is very common. Um, and then very rarely it's because they're that curious. I don't know why that is. I have met a few travelers who were British girls who actually studied Russian, but it's not a culture or a region that at the moment attracts a lot of women as
Right.
visitors
Well,
from
that's
the
fair
West.
enough. That's fair
So
enough.
I
And
don't
then,
really. Yeah,
right.
sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, and I do want to say, there's obviously not every episode can please everyone, so I just want to put that out there. And there is 127 something to listen to for general language learning advice. So I think it's okay to bring that kind of perspective in because it is a real thing. It does exist. Some people might, let's say, be blissfully ignorant of this kind of tourism or this kind of traveling, but I really like the idea of actually talking about it and bringing it because those people, the naive Westerners, I should call them, as I think most would be if they just went without any preparation. They would get scammed. They would get dragged through those terrible experiences that can be so easily avoided. So that's why I think it's really valuable to have that side of the story on, even though it's not universally applicable. Because obviously, there's also lots of people who are like, "Well, I'm learning, Spanish, and I don't care about Eastern Europe." So, which
Yeah,
is
of
fair
course.
enough, exactly. You can't talk about everything at once. So I didn't want I didn't want to put you on the spot and try and explain it just to you for inclusion's sake. It's just in case you had experience of anyone visiting you or any friends or anything you'd heard something from, just a quick, little status. That was all I was after. But if you don't
Yeah,
have it, that's fine. We'll just
I'll.
link up,
I
Miss.
I do have one friend. She came to Odessa. She's Swiss. I think she just finished high school. She was probably about 18. She stayed for 4 months to learn Russian. I asked her at the end of her stay, how did it go for you? She said, I had an amazing time.
Oh wow,
She absolutely loved it. Um, she said she liked the guys. Apparently, she had some romance as well. So I guess it's just something that isn't as renowned, right, or famous for women to come. But girls
or
basically don't. This kind
maybe
of
not as
demographic of 18 to
complicated.
30 doesn't travel there from the West. That's female in general. So I think they would be safer, and I think the culture and everything is really interesting, but it's not what appeals to them apparently at the moment, and that's fine. They can go to
Well,
Italy, Spain. There are a lot of amazing places in the world.
Exactly, but it's also pretty cool because it's probably not just. It's just not a thing, I guess. Whereas guys coming, it is a thing. So there are traps to be
Yeah,
careful of.
100%. 100%. And I was once that naive Westerner
Of
on
course.
that first trip. So I've learned from my mistakes, and that's why I want to help guys. Not everybody wants to hear the message, as you alluded to. There's a lot of trolls and hate on the internet and comments, either from different people. Actually, most of the negative comments come from actually guys from the West who don't accept what the message I'm telling them is like.
Mm,
These are things that actually happen, and this is what you need to be careful of. And as you said, like people say you can't generalize. Listen, there are trends in life. If you
of
want to
course.
ignore them, that's your problem. And if you ever in that situation, something bad happens, then that's what you turning a blind eye, refusing to heed advice. That's what it leads to. But these are real things that happen. Everything in my channel is based on my personal experience and the experience of my foreign friends who go there. And unfortunately, it's not all champagne and girls and fun, right? There are bad things that happen, as in every country. So you just need
Sure.
to be aware of those to make sure that you have the Tsar experience and not the anti-Tsar experience, I
And
guess, and end
and
up penniless and loveless, exactly, somewhere, and bitter towards Eastern Europe on your way out. So I just want to help, especially after my own first trip there that didn't go. Was certainly not the Tsar experience on the first trip. It was very frustrating. I didn't speak very much Russian. I had all these problems. I said, been drugged, been robbed, and whatnot.
why did
So
you
I just
go
want
back there? If
to.
you had
Sorry.
such a bad first experience, what made you go back and give it a second chance?
Oh, it was such an amazing adventure.
Ah,
Uh, it was riveting from start to finish. I was so philosophical after the trip. It was a big culture shock. I questioned a lot of things about my own culture after I got back.
okay. Like
Um,
what?
I think gender roles a lot, actually. Um, I've grown up with a very liberal or liberated, emancipated mother. So I'd always just expected things to be very egalitarian, right, in this kind of gender role. And then seeing a culture where I had to operate in that was completely the opposite, and people there felt very comfortable with it, made me think a lot about how we uh, see gender roles in general, right?
Hmm.
I believe in completely inequality of opportunity, 100%, regardless of your gender, or your race, or your background, or sexual orientation. But in a lot of parts of the world, people feel more comfortable playing a certain role in society. Um, and that was the first time I was really confronted with it, up close and personal, for such an extended period of time. So that was very interesting. It made me think a lot when I got back to obviously Western
Mm.
Europe. I was living in Brussels at the time.
But that's one of the beauties of traveling, I would say, anyways. When you experience new parts of the world, and that goes for languages as well, it really makes you understand where you came from better, like the country you were from, or the language you're speaking, the mentality. Like that comparison, I find really valuable, and I think in general, it makes people better people because they have better perspectives on many things instead of just their own bubble or their own country's kind of view on everything.
Absolutely, Chris. It broadens your horizons and your points of views. You have to consider other society structures and the way they think, and it definitely gives you a new perspective on your own. It could make you like your own more, or maybe question and see that things might work better differently. It's definitely very, very valuable for everybody, no matter where they're from or where they travel to. I think it's just something that's really great to experience and bring back.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I hope we've done a good job here on the podcast today to kind of encourage people to travel. I definitely need to travel more. As you know, I've met you around the world, so it's not that I
yeah.
haven't traveled at all, but for the last year or so, I've taken it a little bit easy. So hopefully, from next year on, I'll get to travel a little bit more. Come over and say hi in Ukraine. I think that could be cool. As you know, I also speak a little bit of Russian, so I think that experience could probably be almost a Tsar experience if we make it happen.
Chris, I
As long,
promise you, if you come, you will have the Tsar experience.
well,
Some of your other friends in the language learning community who also produce content online, they've come. They were not disappointed. They had, they got
fantastic.
to sample the Tsar experience. So, yeah, I mean, I want to just maybe, I'm not sure if we're near the end of the podcast at this exact point, but I want to say to your listeners who are interested, of course, who are probably going to be male, right?
Probably,
Certain
yeah.
and want to travel to Eastern Europe. Listen, I was once that clueless Westerner who arrived on these shores, but I learned, first of all, Russian as a language is not that hard, like everything else. Once you have a good plan and you're determined and you're motivated, I have these amazing experiences in terms of travel just every day. People are so friendly to me here. And language helps me a lot with the communication and also understanding the culture. And I'm somewhere where I'm pretty unique, right? I mean, there are just like, and not in Odessa or Kiev, but at least here in somewhere like Ismail, right? I'm going to go to Vilkova, which is known as the Ukrainian Venice tomorrow. It won't look like Venice. I'm not going to exaggerate to people, but it's still going to be an interesting trip down the Danube. And of course, I date beautiful women. And this is, I'm not good looking, particular. I'm not wealthy. I don't have. It's getting laid if you have a Ferrari is pretty easy. Not if you have an electric unicycle. So yeah, and that's partly because I get my ass on a plane here and I hang out and I'm integrated into local culture when I'm traveling here. I speak Russian and I'm socially calibrated to communicate with people and build those relationships. And if I can do it, then of course anyone else can do it. I mean, one of the things which always amused me, Chris, about the comments, especially under the videos where I talk about Ukrainian girls or girls from other parts of Eastern Europe, is like the number of guys who try to insult me about my looks. Like, yes, that's why you want to listen to me. Because if I can do it looking the way I do, and some of my friends do even, then obviously anyone can. And people who know me right that are just bitter and jealous. So to your listeners, I want to say if you're in that demographic that's interested in coming here, male and straight, then because my friends who are male and gay didn't really seem to enjoy it as much.
Right.
Listen, this channel will inspire you for sure. And, I've actually been to gay clubs in Kiev, even though I'm straight, with some friends. I mean, it's fine. It's not. I mean, the society itself is not very tolerant of homosexuality for sure. I mean, the girls I've ever talked to or the guys, they just find it like so bizarre that anyone be gay. Even though, like, I see the guys, the waiters or whatever, who are obviously gay, right? If I say, I remember this is a funny anecdote. Is that one of my other foreign friends said to me, "Oh yeah, I actually really like the gay waiter at this place." And one of the Ukrainians was, "What do you mean there's a gay waiter?" I was like, well, "The guy's obviously gay, right? That's how we distinguish him from the other 5 waiters because it's so obvious." But they were like,
the gator was
gay
off.
waiter? It's like the whole concept that someone can be gay is like completely just taboo, right?
Yeah.
So they had never even considered that someone was gay. But that's another story, and that's not the Tsar
Sure.
Experience.
No, and I guess
Sure,
you could talk endlessly about what happens or what's possible in Kiev and being a major city. They'll have everything, I guess, from raves to heavy metal and to everywhere you want to go and experience.
there's probably a blogger who does stuff like being gay and traveling in Eastern Europe and stuff like that. I'm sure if it hasn't existed, there's a market for it. Someone go take the idea and run with it. So yeah, that's just in summary. I want to say to your listeners is like Eastern Europe. Like I'll tell you why this is important to listen to. Tim Ferriss wrote a very famous book called The 4-Hour Workweek. It's it's probably the most read book by any sort of like digital nomad or anyone who wants to automate business, right? In that book, he talked about how he went to Argentina after the currency collapse and was like, living occasionally independently because he sort of automated a lot of his business and just having this phenomenal time for like 20% of the price because the currency collapsed and he made himself location independent, which meant he could go and do the same job, just be in Argentina, making the same salary. Like here, it's 20% of the price of the month.
Yeah.
Like for the same quality. There's nowhere else like it in the world. Like some of my friends go to Asia, like, yeah, you know what? Ukraine is better value for money.
Yeah.
It's not going to stay like that. Like Argentina didn't either, and these things all change. Like you need to get your ass on a plane here. Learn some Russian.
Go to the clubs, have the Tsar Experience, and be happy, I guess.
Exactly. I mean,
sounds cool. We'll do it. I'll make a promise here on air. We'll definitely do it. It will happen. I don't know if it's next year or the year after, but one of the two definitely will be. And we're gonna bring the roof down or whatever the phrase is. I'm
not sure. Do we bring the roof down? It feels like that sounds like a disaster.
I don't know what it means.
Burning building or something. So yeah, I mean, I actually just to maybe sound off on the whole value thing, I did a comparison once because I used to live in Munich, which is a very expensive city, Bavaria. And I calculated once what we were doing to the summer because I remember like there was like Starnberger See and hanging out in nice places and eating, how much all that cost. And compare what we do in Odessa. I was saying, dude, if we live in Odessa, this would be like a lifestyle of 10 to 15,000 euros a month, easily, easily.
10 to 15,000 euros a month.
If we were living in Munich, right, doing this.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fucking baller lifestyle, man.
Yeah.
This is we're eating the best restaurants every day with views of the sea. We like,
I was surprised
we're
when you
smoking
said
shisha.
that.
We're doing all this drinking champagne nonstop. I mean, you can still spend 10 or 15,000 in Odessa if you want to, but I'm just saying, like, we were spending, I don't know, like maybe 2 to 3,000 to have the same experience.
Yeah.
And we were probably dating a lot better looking girls than nearly everybody is going to in Munich. And I'm not ditching in Munich girls in particular, but that's just the reality.
No, but
right?
I know what you mean. I mean, when we met up in Budapest, I remember you saying how even Budapest was more expensive than Ukraine. But for me, that experience of Budapest was ridiculous because my reference was Copenhagen or London, or Manchester is also getting quite expensive now. And it's just there's just no comparison even to that. So if there's something even cheaper, then I can totally relate. And it's not really about that. I don't think it's super important. And of course, you can find value other countries as well if you look for it. But for me, it's just I don't know. It's just the experience, isn't it? It's like you have such a better time. And I think also because people have to travel there, it's not free to fly. And I think Eastern Europe, not the best connected in the world, so flights there I noticed are a little bit more expensive than going to the touristy locations like Budapest and Paris. I can get to with Ryanair for £40 return in the off season. To get to Ukraine, it's probably a little bit more, but once you do get there, I can get so much more for my pounds.
Exactly, definitely. You'll have a phenomenal time. Actually, that's a good thing that's more expensive to fly. It keeps the hordes away.
Well, you can only keep them away for so long, I think. If you've seen it with other countries, it's happening. But I guess as long as they have pretty strict visa rules, then maybe it's not going to go away anytime soon.
Well, that's Russia. That's the only one that has strict visa rules. It's like
yeah, but I mean, one thing is getting in, right? Another thing is staying if people want to settle down and take advantage of the the currency, without doing some weird hopping back and forth like a lot of people do. But anyway, Conor, it's been a pleasure to talk about some travel stuff here. So it's not always just language learning, and also some not controversial, I wouldn't say, but definitely a topic not often discussed. So that's also pretty cool. Thank you for that. And if people want to get to know you a bit better, find out more about you, you talked about your YouTube channel, Conor Clyne, the Tsar Experience, and Tsar Experience website. Are there any other places you want people to drop you a follow or send you a message if they have any questions for you?
Yeah, you can write me by email. Actually, I should point out that Tsar is spelled the British way, Tsar, even though I write absolutely everything else in American English. I just like the way it was spelled with British English. It just looked aesthetically more appealing to me. So it's Tsar. It's not star. It's Tsar.
Okay.
So the T and the S are in the other order. It's experience.com. So you can write me Conor Clyne. That's a name that no one will probably be able to spell correctly if they listen to it. I'm sure that
I still
once they find the channel, they'll see the way it's Cono or Clyne. So Conor only has one N, but it has two O's. And Clyne is not spelled with a K and does not have an I. It has a Y. So that's our experience. That's probably the most useless way of trying to contact me because you'll never get the address right. So otherwise, just go on to Instagram, follow me. Tsar Experience is my handle.
Put a lot on Instagram as well.
Experience.
I've noticed it's always fun to see what's going on in sort of your stories and pictures from there.
Yeah, exactly. You get to see the Tsar Experience every day.
Right, and feel annoyed that you're not there.
Yeah, people get to see what I have for breakfast, what I'm up to all day. It doesn't always just fun and glamour that I'm actually working on stuff, but you get to see in the raw exactly where I'm at and get a little bit of, I guess, it's like looking through a peephole and being able to see what to expect when you show up here in Eastern Europe. So that's what I encourage you to write me a direct message there. I do read my direct messages as long as you don't look spammy.
Sure.
I will reply. if it's interesting enough. Otherwise, you can write me an email if you figure out my email address with the way I spell my name, or you go to Facebook. I have a Facebook page, Conor Clyne Tsar Experience. So I think it's the handle there again is Tsar Experience, and you can write me a message there, just a normal message, and I will get back to you.
Cool.
So yeah, Chris, I'm about to go out. It's Saturday night. It's 10:30. I'm about to have a little bit of this Tsar Experience this evening myself.
Right.
I don't think Ismail has amazing nightlife, but I am curious to go and check it out and see what happens. So,
well, thank you for coming on again and sharing some of your unique perspectives with the actual Funzi audience. I'm sure we'll meet again somewhere around the world, maybe Ukraine, who knows? But otherwise, at the next conference or meeting place, or if you come to the UK for a change, we can hang out as well.
Хорошо, спасибо, Крис. Увидимся скоро, да?